Ahoy there, matey! This is your captain speaking. We're finally finishing this project today. To do the rigging for the model, I mainly followed along with merely Wufei's beginner tutorials. The process was pretty easy to follow along with. Even when I had to go back when I missed something, it was relatively easy to spot what I had done wrong or missed most of the time. But since I followed along with her tutorial, I won't go into too much detail on the process. You'll have to go check out her helpful videos for yourself if you're interested. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Ooh, wrong side. To rig the blinking and eye physics, I essentially just used the pen tool to scoot everything into place. There were some parts that gave me trouble, like the side and bottom lash that created a weird gap. I did eventually manage to get around this and finish the eyes. The physics ended up very nice and bouncy, but I do think I could have pushed the bounciness a little more, especially for the iris. For the eye rigging, the physics window doesn't really show up when I'm working on the eyes, because I didn't realize I had to mark it as a separate window to record in OBS. It should be in the rest of the recording though. Before I started, I thought the eyes would be the hardest part, but man, was I wrong. Doing the eyes first made me feel so overconfident, a feeling that I almost immediately lost going into the head's X angle rigging. This took me so ridiculously long that I had to rework my entire schedule for finishing the model. I was way too confident when planning everything out. With the head X angle, I had to bring in some new layers for the nose, among other things. I wasn't sure how to rig it because you usually only see the anime line-like nose. I tried to rig the nose on my own before looking for a tutorial for this type of nose or something similar, but I ended up finding this video by Lovemura. She draws noses similarly to how I do, so I used her method. Finally, moving on to the Y angle of the head, which is the up and down movement. I wasn't feeling too bad about it, but when I went to put it all together, let's just say it wasn't looking ideal in the testing window. So I had to humble myself and went back a few steps. I decided to draw some head angle references, both with and without the hat. I think they ended up pretty good. I ended up using this image by the art gun on Twitter as a sort of guide. It was really helpful. And then I didn't touch the project for about a week. I was too scared to go on, guys. But eventually I decided to scrap my original take and went in again to take at the head angles, not everything. But this time I had my trusty reference. It actually made things much easier, but the movement still kept looking off, so I scrapped that version again. And you know what they say, third time's the charm. Luckily, that was also the case for me this time. It's not perfect, but I got something I'm pretty okay with, especially for my first model. The span of the corner movements felt like a big part of the model looking wonky, so I ended up restricting how far the head would actually turn in each direction. This makes the motion look a little more limited, but I think it looks a lot better. I would have liked to have a wider range, especially when looking up and down, but I just don't have the will, patience, or skill to do that at this point in time. Other than that, I have some tiny details to point out for these angles that I'm actually really proud of. For the Y movement, which is tied to the head's up and down movement, I had the points of the ears move up when she looks down and down when she looks up. It sounds like a very tiny detail, but I feel like it does add a lot of depth since the ears are so long. Just popping in before we move on from the head angles to remind you to like the video, which I assume you do if you made it this far, and subscribe if you would like to see more from me in the future. Mouth was another part I was pretty anxious for. Going into it, it felt like it would be super hard, but it ended up being relatively easy for some reason, especially after that train wreck of the head angles. I did import some new layers for the top and bottom lips, since I originally had the line, skin tone, and the sort of lipstick as separate layers, and I really didn't want to glue them. It was also at this point that I realized I never changed the color of the outlines for the inside mouth parts. So all the teeth and the tongue had black outlines, which was not ideal. I had to redraw these parts since I accidentally merged them in the original file at some point. This didn't take too long at least. I loosely followed the mouth chart Merely Wuffei provided in her video. I did give my model very different looking mouth shapes though. I was considering not making the cat mouth the default mouth, but I decided to stick to it. I just ended up adding in a wider smile, so the model technically has two smile versions, in a way. There was also the rounder mouth shape, which is pretty self-explanatory, and then I gave her a silly frown, or like, I feel like it looks silly. The model needs to look cute at all times, even when she's making an upset face. Adjusting the mouth on its inside parts to fit all the different shapes was a little annoying, especially the lower teeth. The deformer was really testing my patience with the odd shape the parent deformers were giving it. I did somehow morph it into something great though, I think. Since I'd just finished the mouth, I decided to move on to the tongue. I took a look at this video from Yoshino Art to give me some guidance, but when I got the idea, I did my own thing. It did get pretty messy when I tried getting it to work with all those mouth shapes. I went and made sure every keyframe of the tongue would work with every single mouth shape. That was a lot of keyframes. There is probably a better way to have done it, but I managed to do it on my own, sort of. It works, so when I tested it, I did realize I need to use my phone for the tracking to pick up the tongue. It's not supported on webcam at this point. I ended up buying the mobile version. It disconnects from the PC after 5 minutes, and I would lose my mind if I had to reconnect it that often. The tracking also seemed to work much better than the webcam anyway, so that's a plus. After that, I moved back to Merely Wuffei's tutorials for the majority of the rest of the rigging. I finally moved on to the hair physics. This required me to glue quite a lot of parts. The braid base and longer part of the braid were the bigger parts, but I had also separated the 3 end strands into different layers. I had to glue each piece separately. After I was done gluing, I went ahead and copied things over. As for the physics itself, I grouped all the hair pieces between different parameters. This is mostly just to be able to play around with the physics of different lengths of hair. All the parameters worked pretty much the same in the end, except for the hair horns. I gave them less parameters since I don't want them to swing around as much as the rest of the hair. Just a little jiggle. Things were pretty easy when I got to the body angles. I was basically able to do this without a tutorial to guide me. I feel like I added some of my own flair into different parts somehow. With the body turning, I added some bending into the arms with deformers to add a little more life to the movement. After that was done, I moved on to the jiggle physics. This was very complicated to figure out since I have so many layers, and they ended up looking right where I was editing them, but when I looked at them in the physics, it wasn't working. There were a lot of gaps. It was very complicated to figure out, but I think I made a good call with all the layers I separated it into. The breast ended up being the most jiggly part of the model, actually. Everything else only moves this tiny bit, but that's okay. We all like a little jiggle physics after all. At this point, I was basically done, but still had some tiny things to do, like adding the toggles. I even drew some parts last second just because I wanted to. And once I was done with that, I had to set up the model in VTuber Studio according to my face, or how the program was picking up my face. I didn't record any of that, so I can just go ahead and show you guys the result. Please just keep in mind this is my first time drawing and rigging a live 2D model, so things might be bad or wonky in some places, or all places, but here she is. So, this is how I look. I hope you guys like it. It's still a little wonky in some places, especially with some of the mouth tracking. So I can do a little blushy when I smile, and I can do this. It does pop out sometimes when I open my mouth too much, but we'll just have to deal with that. I also have my short hair, which I added at the last second actually. It's very basic, but I just had the temptation to do it, so here she is. And I also have a hat. And if you watch closely, you'll notice that it presses down my hoge. I thought that was a pretty cute idea to add in. I don't think I mentioned it when I was designing the model. And wait, is there anything else? Oh, there's the scared face. When I open my eyes, she wants to look down for some reason and I can't fix it. Okay, and then there's also teary eyes with a little bit of blush, which I think is cute. I'm not sure if I'll use this one or this one a lot, especially when doing art, but we'll see, won't we? Was there something else? Okay, no, that was everything. So, I hope you guys like it. It's not perfect, but I love it. That's that, yeah. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you again next time. Bye bye!